present-day disputed land of West Bank and Gaza Strip between Israel and Palestine was part of an erstwhile Philistine region of Ottoman Empire before World War I. It was an area in and around the holy city of Jerusalem. The city was mostly populated by Arabs, then Christians, and a small population of Jews, yet their roots dated back to almost like 500 years back when the first Jew landed in Ottoman Empire as a refugee. Thus, irrespective of small imbalance in societal hierarchy, mostly it was a harmony between the different religions and the people around the city of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem is sacred to many religious traditions, including the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which consider it a holy city. Some of the most sacred places for each of these religions are found in Jerusalem, and one shared between all three is the Temple Mount. Jerusalem is mostly important to the Christianity because it is where Jesus Christ was brought occasionally as a child, preached to the poor in his adult life, crucified at the end of his life, and resurrected by the God. The Church of Holy Sepulchre is said to have been built over the location where Jesus was crucified and where the tomb was buried. Jerusalem has been the holiest city in Judaism and the ancestral and spiritual homeland for Jewish people since the 10th century BC. During classical antiquity, Jerusalem was considered the center of the world where God resided. Jerusalem is also considered a sacred site in Islamic tradition, along with Mecca and Medina. Islamic tradition holds that previous prophets were associated with the city, and the Islamic prophet Muhammad visited the city on a nocturnal journey, due to which significance it was the first Qibla, or the direction of prayer for the Muslim, and the Prophet Muhammad designated the Al-Aqsa for pilgrimage. Before World War I, the region of Palestine, as a part of Ottoman Empire, was not only a place of religious importance due to the city of Jerusalem, but also was considered to be a place of strategic importance for a British Empire due to its proximity to Suez Canal, which gave access to India. It was out of a need to coordinate British and French interest in the region of Middle East that Sykes-Picot Agreement was born in 1916. The Sykes-Picot Agreement was a 1916 secret treaty between the United Kingdom and France, with assent from the Russian Empire and the Kingdom of Italy, to define the mutually agreed spheres of influence in the Middle East and control an eventual partition of Ottoman Empire. The Sykes-Picot Agreement created the modern Middle East. It represents one of the first installments in a long line of modern European and subsequent American meddling in the region, and in providing a set of unrealistic and impossible promises to the Arabs, it led directly to the Israeli-Palestine conflict. The line across a map of Middle East it drew created colonial spheres of influence that cut directly and artificially across the region that had previously been divided along ethnic, linguistic, and religious lines. In 1916, with the encouragement and support of Britain and France, who were fighting Ottomans in World War I, the Sharif of Mecca, Hussein bin Ali, led a pan-Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire with the aim of securing Arab independence and creating a single unified Arab state spanning from the Arab territories from Aleppo in Syria to Aden in Yemen. The British government earlier had agreed to recognize Arab independence after the war in exchange for the Sharif of Mecca launching an Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire, as per McMahon Hussein correspondence. The main contribution of Arab revolt to the war was to pin down tens of thousands of Ottoman troops who otherwise might have been used to attack the Suez Canal and conquering Damascus. However, with subsequent partitioning of the Ottoman Empire, the British and French reneged on the promises to Hussein to support a pan-Arab state. Although Hussein was acknowledged as the king of Hejaz, Britain later shifted support to Al Saud, leaving him diplomatically and militarily isolated. The revolt therefore failed in its objective to create a pan-Arab state, but Arabia was freed from Ottoman. A year later, during World War I, in 1917, there came another conflicting promise by the British government in the name of Balfour Declaration, announcing support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, then an Ottoman region with a small minority Jewish population. The declaration was contained in a letter dated 2nd November 1917 from the United Kingdom. The main reason for Balfour Declaration was in particular to garner Jewish sympathy, which would confirm the support of American Jewry and would make it more difficult for the Germany to reduce her military commitments and improve her economic positions on the Eastern Front. It was also that Jewish presence in the Palestine would strengthen Britain's position on the Suez Canal and reinforce the route to their imperial dominion in India. In the broader Arab world, the declaration was seen as a betrayal of the British wartime understanding with the Arabs. The Sharif of Mecca and Arab leaders considered the declaration a violation of previous commitment made in the McMahon Hussein correspondence in exchange for launching Arab revolt. At the end of 1918, the fall of Ottoman Empire in the hands of British and Arab forces, the Ottoman Syria was split into three administrative subunits. The south was controlled by British troops, which included Jerusalem, Jaffa, Masdal, and Beersheba. The west was managed by France, which included Egypt, parts of Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon, and the east was handled by Arab and British together, which included Egypt, parts of Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon. Soon after the end of World War I, it was concluded that the Middle East was not ready for independence yet, and urged mandates be established on the territories whose purpose was to accompany a process of transition to self-determination. In 1920, the region of Palestine was transferred to British control as Mandatory Palestine. It was governed under British civil administration until 1948, during which the competing Arab and Zionist nationalist movement clashed with one another. The cause of many these clashes were unrealistic promises made to each side by British, promises directly related to the artificial arrangement of modern Middle East initiated by the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The agreement then helped frame the contours of modern nation states in region where before there had been none. since it is essentially an accord between the two colonist powers extended to the region, it would have devastating effects. During the Mandate, the area saw the rise of nationalist movements in both Jewish and Arab communities. Competing interests of the two populations led to the 1936-39 Arab revolt in Palestine and 1944-48 Jewish insurgency in Mandatory Palestine. With India gaining its independence from the British rule in 1947, the need to secure and maintain the Suez Canal slowly decreased. Coupled with it, the British forces in Palestine Mandate were taking a huge casualties due to ever-increasing insurgency both from the Palestine Zionist and the Arab revolutionist. On November 29, 1947, the United Nations recommended partitioning Palestine into Jewish Arab states and a special international regime for city of Jerusalem. Each state would comprise three major sections. The Arab state would have an enclave at Jaffa in order to have a port in the Mediterranean as per the United Nations partition plan for Palestine. With about 32% of population, the Jews were allocated 56% of the territory. It contained 5 lakh Jews, almost 4.5 lakh Arabs, and most of it was in the Negev desert. The Palestine Arabs were allocated 42% of the land, which had a population of 8 lakh Palestinian Arabs and 10,000 Jews. In consideration of its religious significance, the Jerusalem area, including Bethlehem, with 1 lakh Jews and equal number of Palestine Arab, was to become a corpus separatum to be administered by UN. The residents of UN-administered territory were given the right to choose to be part as a citizen of either of new states. The Jewish leadership accepted the partition plan as the indispensable minimum and glad to gain the international recognition. However, the representative of the Palestine Arabs and the Arab League firmly opposed the UN action and rejected its authority in the matter, arguing that partition plan was unfair to the Arabs because of the population balance at the time. Almost immediately, the mandate collapsed into a civil war between the Jewish and Arab population. The insurgency against the British continued, although Haganah, Irgun and Lehi focused on fighting the Arabs. The British Mandate ended on 15th May 1948 with the State of Israel declaring its independence on the previous day, which was followed by the outbreak of 1948 Arab-Israeli war between Israel and its neighboring Arab states. The 1947 to 1949 Palestine War was a war fought in the territory of Palestine under the British Mandate. It is known in Israel as War of Independence. It is the first war of Israeli-Palestine conflict and broader Arab-Israeli conflict. During the war, British Empire withdrew from the mandatory Palestine, which had been part of Ottoman Empire until 1970. The war culminated in the establishment of State of Israel by the Jews and saw a complete demographic transformation of territory the Jews occupied, with the displacement around 7 lakh Palestinian Arabs and destruction of most of their urban areas. Many Palestine Arabs ended up stateless, displaced either to Palestine territories captured by Egypt and Jordan or to the surrounding Arab states. Many of them, as well as their descendants, remain stateless and in refugee camps.